What do you treasure? What is your treasure? And boys and girls, maybe we could begin by asking Big Al that same question. Well, hello, old buddy. How are you? Not so good, huh? What's the matter? Cardinals. Cardinals? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess there's next year, huh? Maybe. All right. All right. Well, Big Al, if I were to ask you, what's your treasure? What would you say? Show you. You want to show me? All right. Money. All right, Big Al, I see. Well, you know, money's not bad, and it's important, and it helps us. Yours. Oh, you want to see my treasure? All right. I brought my treasure box. What's in it? What's in it? Well, I'll show you a few things. Money? No, there's no money in there. Okay. Here's one thing. Star. Yeah, it's a star. Tin. Cheap. Yeah, kind of cheap. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But Big Al, this star means a lot to me. Why? Well, Big Al, every year at Christmas, we would put this star on a little tree next to our manger to remind us that we wanted Jesus to be the light in our house. Whoa. Mm-hmm. So that star is in my treasure box because it reminds me of how much I treasure growing up in a home that tried to be like Jesus. Cool. What else? What else? Well, here's a little tiny piece of wood from a tree. Why? Why? Well, Big Al, I got this when I was climbing in the mountains. And I brought this back to remind me of how precious this earth is. What a treasure we have in our air, in our water, and the earth, and in every living thing. Cool. What else? What else? Well, here's one of my treasures. Paper. Oh, it's a paper, but it's much more than a paper. Big Al, this is a note that my dad wrote and put in the safe in case anything ever happened to him. And after he died, we found this note, and he had written it to all of his children to tell us how proud he was of us and how much he loved us. Oh, yeah. I keep this as part of my treasure because it reminds me of my love for my dad, which is forever, and his love for me, which is forever. What else? Well, I'll show you one more thing in my treasure box. You know what that is? Globe. You're right, Big Al. That's a globe. Why? Why do I put a globe in my treasure box? Well, Big Al, because that's to remind me to treasure all the children of the world. Why? Because, Big Al, that's what Jesus did. To Jesus, every person, every child matters. And they were his treasure. And I want to be like him. What are you thinking? Go Rams. Okay. Guess we've given up on the Cardinals, and glad we haven't given up on the Rams yet. What would you put in your treasure box? What are those things that you treasure? What is it that you would put in some sort of treasure box to remind you of those things that really matter to you? Big Al seemed to understand the various things I put in mine, except for the globe. He didn't quite get why I would have that in there. But in today's scriptures, we hear again that if I want to be someone who values what God values, I have to have a place in my heart for all the children of the world. And it's overwhelming sometimes, and people will think, how can we care for so many when there are so much trouble and heartache that are part of the children of the world in their lives? And the prophet Amos today says, how can you not care? This week and next week, we will hear the prophet challenge us to say, you believe in God? Well, then you've got to show that by how you work to make a world that is more just for all God's children. And my brothers and sisters, that's exactly what Jesus did. Look at his life and listen to his words. He cared in a special way for the underdog, the lowly, the outcast, and challenged all who would ever follow him to do the same. There are some websites I will not visit, some radio and TV hosts I will not listen to or watch, because I think they bring out the worst in us. For a variety of reasons in a variety of different ways. And I don't mean to offend anyone's political sensibilities here, but one of the people I try not to listen to is on KMOX, named Rush Limbaugh. And when I listen to him, how he makes half-truths as if they're the whole truth and then labels people and ridicules them, and so much of what he values seems to me so far from what Jesus stood for. It makes me sad, and I don't want to even hear that. But the other day I was trying to flip on KMOX to get the end of the news, and I'd missed it, and he was on. And he was making his point very boldly that it's a level playing field. And what's wrong with the poor in this world is the poor. And if they could just pick themselves up by their bootstraps like he did and quit complaining, then everything would be just fine. And then he went on to ridicule people like me who would disagree and suggest that it's not a level playing field. And I think about this playing field and why the prophet Amos and all the prophets, including Jesus, would challenge us to make sure we had a more level playing field, because it's not. The truth is that there are some people who have so much wealth, and I heard a man say this not long ago, with a single phone call to his broker, he made $1 million. And I know people who work 2 jobs all day and all night, single parents, to try to provide health care for their children, which they can't afford. My brothers and sisters, this very day, in the children of the world, 800 million are chronically hungry. And during the 1 hour of this Mass, 1,500 children will starve to death or die because they don't have drinking water that's safe. We do a lot of charity here, and that's good. Next weekend, we will have our yearly visit from someone from the mission co-op plan of the Archdiocese, who will describe the work that his mission does and ask us to support that, and that's good. And every year we have our growing project where we support farmers who help offer money to help feed hungry kids. And our West House is going to be a temporary shelter for a woman who is homeless through no fault of her own, her and her child. And our Vincent de Paul Society works to take care of those in our own community who suffer. And that charity work is very important. But my brothers and sisters, today's scriptures remind us that we also have to be about the work of justice, to create a world that is a more level playing field for all. And the image that will stay with me always is one that I heard when I was in college. It described a family who were having a little picnic on the banks of a river when they heard the sound of a child crying. And they looked up and that child was floating down the river. So they found a way to get that child out of the river and were wrapping that child in a blanket when they heard the sound of another child crying coming down the river. So the mom continued to take care of the child while the dad and his son found a way to get this child into the safety as well. And they're taking care of that child when they heard the sound of another child crying coming down the river. So they called for help, and more people came to help as more and more children came down the river. And soon they got organized so that some were pulling the children out of the river in boats. Others were providing them comfort and security and blankets. Some were feeding them. Others were providing them emergency medical care. And one man stood up and said, "I'm leaving." And they said, "Why are you leaving? We need all the help we could get." He said, "I'm going up the river to find out why all these babies are in it in the first place." And as important as the work of charity is, and the fact that it's even easier to talk about, we have to also do the work of justice and look at how to create a world that is more just. How do we, in the end, bring an end to the violence that is so rampant? Will we ever get rid of it completely? No. But one of the biggest steps that will end war is to create a world where it's a more even playing field. And the steps to that are complex. The challenges are immense. But I believe, our scriptures believe, that if we are to have hearts like God's heart, we got to be willing to wrestle with that. And I think, for example, how the Catholic Church has always asked its people to vote with what's been called a preferential option for the poor. When facing the issues, think of those who aren't as empowered. How will this affect those who are hungry? How will this affect those who are unborn? How will this affect those who are handicapped or the mentally ill who are homeless? How will this affect the immigrant, who at this day are fairly easy to pick on, and we have to find a way through the complexity of that to care for them? How will this protect the environment? How will this work to make sure that those who are vulnerable are cared for? Those are hard questions, but we got to ask them. And maybe when we listen to the news, I read through the paper, maybe beforehand a little prayer. Jesus, help me to hear this newscast as you would hear it. And help my heart be right in working to create a world that is more just and loving. I don't know what you would put in your treasure box. I doubt that many like Big Al would just hold up a wad of money and say, "That's all that I care about." Although sometimes this has more sway over us than we are aware of. But I'll bet there'd be all kinds of things in your treasure box that mattered to you. But I pray that there would also be something in there that symbolized all the children of the world, the greatest treasure of all, to Jesus.